The great hall of the Galactic Alliance was full of noise and light. Hundreds of alien warriors from different worlds stood together. Some had scales. Some had fur. Some had skin that glowed in the dark. They were all here for the same reason. They wanted to see the new species that asked to join the Alliance. Humans had arrived. Commander Yuna stood at the center of the hall. She was a Valoran, one of the most feared warrior races in the galaxy. Her body was covered in silver scales that could stop a blade. Her eyes were yellow, like a snake. She had won 100 battles and killed 1,000 enemies. No one in the Alliance questioned her strength today. She was not happy. She looked at the small group of humans that walked into the hall. There were only 12 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms. They carried no visible weapons. They had soft skin and round eyes and hair on their heads. To Yuna, they looked like prey animals pretending to be predators. One human walked at the front of the group. His name was Taiho. He was not tall. He was not big. He had short black hair and a calm face. He did not smile. He did not frown. He just walked forward with steady steps until he stood before Commander Yuna. The hall became quiet. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Yuna circled around Taiho slowly. She was much taller than him. Her claws made clicking sounds on the metal floor. She leaned close and sniffed the air near his neck. "This is what Earth sends us," she said loudly. Her voice echoed through the hall. A soft little creature with no claws, no armor, no venom. Some aliens in the crowd laughed. "Why?" Una continued walking around him. "I've heard stories about humans. They say you are clever. They say you are dangerous." She stopped in front of him and looked down at his face. "But all I see is a weak thing that bleeds when you cut it." More laughter filled the hall. Taiho did not move. He did not speak. He just looked at Yuna with his calm, dark eyes. This made Yuna angry. She wanted a reaction. She wanted fear or anger or something. But this human gave her nothing. "Perhaps you should show us," Yuna said. She stepped back and spread her arms wide. "Show us what a human warrior can do. Fight me right here. Right now. Let everyone see what your species is made of." The crowd cheered. They wanted blood. They wanted entertainment. Taiho finally moved. He took a slow breath and looked around the hall. He saw hundreds of faces watching him. Some were curious. Most were amused. A few looked hungry for violence. Then he looked back at Yuna. "No," he said quietly. The hall went silent again. Yuna blinked. "No? You refuse to fight? Yes, then you admit that humans are weak? That you cannot defeat me?" Taiho thought about this for a moment. "I admit nothing," he said. "I simply choose not to fight you." Yuna laughed. It was a cruel sound. "You choose? What kind of warrior chooses not to fight? What kind of species sends cowards to represent them?" She turned to the crowd. "Look at this. The humans send us their best warrior, and he is afraid to raise his fists." She looked back at Taiho. "Go home, little human. Tell your people that they are not ready for the stars. Tell them that the galaxy belongs to the strong, not the weak." Some of the other human soldiers looked angry. One of them, a woman named Sujin, stepped forward. "Commander, with respect, you should not judge all of us." Taiho raised his hand slightly. Sujin stopped talking. He looked at Yuna one more time. There was no anger in his eyes. There was no fear. There was something else. Something that Yuna did not understand. "Commander Yuna," Taiho said. "You have decided what you want to see. Nothing I do here will change your mind. If I fight and lose, you will say humans are weak. If I fight and win, you will say I got lucky, or that you were not trying. There is no victory for me in this room." He bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of respect, not submission. "I wish you well," he said. Then he turned and walked toward the exit. The crowd was confused. Some laughed again. Some whispered to each other. This was not how warriors were supposed to act. Warriors were supposed to fight. They were supposed to prove themselves with blood and pain. This human was just leaving, running away. Yuna called after him. Her voice was sharp with mockery. Typical. Humanity will never earn a seat among the stars. You are nothing but prey hiding in the shadows. Taiho stopped at the doorway. He stood very still for a long moment. Without turning around, he spoke. His voice was quiet, but somehow everyone in the hall heard him clearly. A wise man once told me something, Taiho said. He said that empty cans make the most noise, and that true strength does not need to announce itself. He paused. I do not need to prove myself to you, Commander. I know what I am. I know what humans are capable of. And one day, you will know too. He walked through the door and disappeared. The hall was silent for a long moment. Then Yuna laughed loudly and waved her hand in the air. Good riddance, she shouted. Let the humans return to their little planet. Let them stay there where they belong. The crowd cheered and laughed with her, but later that night, when Yuna was alone in her quarters, she thought about the human's eyes. She thought about how calm he had been, how steady, how utterly unafraid. She had seen fear in many creatures before they died. She had seen false courage and true courage and everything in between, but she had never seen anything like what she saw in Taiho's eyes. It bothered her. She did not know why. She pushed the thought away and went to sleep. She would remember this moment later. She would remember it very well. And she would feel shame for the words she had spoken, but that was still far in the future. For now, the human was gone, and the galaxy continued to spin. And everyone believed that they had seen the last of the quiet warrior from Earth. They were wrong. 3 weeks passed after the humans left the Alliance Hall. Commander Yuna did not think about them anymore. She had more important things to do. She had battles to plan and soldiers to train and enemies to kill. Then the Drekari came. The Drekari were monsters. There was no other word for them. They looked like giant insects with 6 legs and sharp claws and teeth that could cut through metal. They did not talk. They did not negotiate. They only killed and ate and moved on to the next world. No one knew where they came from. They appeared from the dark spaces between stars like a swarm of hungry locusts. They had destroyed dozens of worlds already. Now they were coming for Alliance territory. The first attack hit a small planet called Kessafor. It was a mining colony on the edge of Alliance space. 3,000 civilians lived there. They were miners and farmers and families with children. They were not soldiers. Commander Yuna received the emergency message in the middle of the night. She jumped out of bed and ran to her ship. Within 2 hours, her fleet was flying through space toward Kessa-4. She thought it would be easy. The Valorans were the best warriors in the galaxy. Her scales could stop any weapon. Her soldiers had won every battle they had ever fought. She was wrong. The Drekari swarm was huge. When Yuna's fleet arrived, she saw more than 200,000 of the creatures, covering the planet's surface like a living carpet. They moved together like water flowing down a hill. They destroyed everything in their path. Yuna ordered the attack. Her ships fired their weapons. Her soldiers dropped from the sky in landing pods. They fought with all their strength and skill. It was not enough. The Drekari adapted faster than any enemy she had ever faced. When her soldiers used energy weapons, the Drekari grew scales that absorbed the energy. When her soldiers used blades, the Drekari grew harder shells. When her soldiers tried to fly away, the Drekari shot acid from their mouths that melted the ships in the air. Within 6 hours, Yuna lost half her fleet. Within 12 hours, she lost 2/3 of her soldiers. By the end of the first day, she was trapped. Her remaining forces were pushed back to a single building in the center of the main city. It was a large warehouse that the civilians had turned into a shelter. 3,000 scared people huddled inside, including children and old ones and wounded soldiers. Yuna stood on the roof of the building and looked out at the swarm. The Drekari surrounded them completely. There was no escape. There was no path through the endless wave of black bodies and sharp claws. She called for help. The Alliance responded. They said reinforcements would arrive in 6 days. Yuna looked at her remaining supplies. They had food for 2 days, water for 3, ammunition for maybe 1 more major battle. 6 days was too long. They would all be dead in 6 days. She told her soldiers to prepare for a final stand. They would fight until the last breath. They would kill as many Drekari as possible before they fell. It was the Valoran way. Die with honor. Die fighting. On the second night, something strange happened. Yuna was standing guard when she heard a sound in the sky. It was not a Drekari sound. It was the roar of engines. Human engines. She looked up and saw a single transport ship cutting through the clouds. It was small and battered and covered in scorch marks. Drekari flew up to attack it. The ship twisted and turned and somehow dodged every strike. It flew over the building and landed hard in the courtyard below. Yuna ran down to see what was happening. The ship's door opened. Smoke poured out from the damaged engines. A figure stepped out of the smoke. It was Taeho. He looked different now. He wore battle armor that was scratched and dented, carried a rifle on his back and a pistol on his hip. His face was tired, but his eyes were the same, calm, steady, unafraid. Behind him came more humans. They walked out of the ship one by one. Men and women in armor, some young, some old. All of them had the same look in their eyes. The look of people who knew they were walking into death and did not care. Yuna counted them. 47 soldiers plus Taeho. 48 humans total. She could not believe it. She thought it was a joke. What is this? She demanded. 48 humans against 200,000 Drekari. Are you insane? Kaiho looked at her. He did not smile, did not frown. Commander Yuna, we meet again. This is not a rescue, Yuna shouted. This is suicide. You will all die. Probably, Taeho agreed. He said it the same way someone might say the sky is blue. It was just a fact. But we are not here to save ourselves. Then why? Why come here to die? Taeho looked past her at the building full of scared civilians. He saw children looking out the windows. He saw old people holding each other. He saw wounded soldiers who could not fight anymore. We are here to buy time, he said simply. Buy time? How? How can 48 humans buy time against a swarm? Taeho turned back to her. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes that she had not seen before. It was not anger, it was not pride, it was something deeper, something older. It was purpose, Commander, he said quietly. Humans have been buying time with their lives since the beginning of our history. It is what we do. It is who we are. He looked at the horizon where the Drekari were massing for another attack. The sun was setting behind them, turning the sky red like blood. We cannot win this fight, Taeho continued. I know that. My soldiers know that. But we can make the enemy pay for every step they take. We can make them bleed for every life they try to take. We can hold this line until help arrives. He looked back at Yuna. 6 days is a long time, but not impossible. Humans have held longer, against worse odds, with less to fight for. Yuna did not know what to say. She had never met anyone like this before. She had mocked this man. She had called him weak. She had laughed at his species. And now he was here, ready to die for people who had ridiculed him. Why? She asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Why do this? After what I said to you, after how I treated you. Taeho's expression did not change. Commander, you asked me a question in that hall. You asked what humans are made of. He checked his rifle and loaded a fresh magazine. I am here to show you. The Drekari began to move. The swarm was coming. Taeho turned to face them. Rest while you can, Commander, he said over his shoulder. The night is about to begin. The first wave hit at midnight. 10,000 Drekari rushed toward the building from all sides. They made no sound as they ran. Their black bodies moved through the darkness like shadows with claws. The only noise was the clicking of their legs on the ground and the scraping of their teeth. Taeho did not panic. He did not shout orders or run around. He simply stood at the main entrance with his rifle raised and waited. The Valorans fought the way they always fought. They roared battle cries and charged forward to meet the enemy. They swung their blades and tore at the Drekari with their claws. They fought with strength and speed and fury. The humans fought differently. They did not charge. They did not roar. They found positions behind walls and rubble and broken vehicles. They waited until the Drekari were close. Then they fired. Every shot hit something. Taiho watched his soldiers work. A woman named Sujin was on the roof with a long rifle. She fired once every 3 seconds. Every shot killed a Drekari. She did not miss. She did not waste ammunition. She just fired and fired and fired until her rifle grew hot in her hands. A man named Dong Wu guarded the east side with 2 other soldiers. When the Drekari broke through a window, he did not run. He dropped his gun and pulled out a knife. He killed 7 of them with that knife before his teammates could reload. Then he picked up his gun and kept shooting. The Valorans were shocked. They had never seen fighting like this. It was not beautiful. It was not honorable. It was ugly and messy and purely about survival. The humans did not care about glory. They only cared about killing the enemy and staying alive long enough to kill more. The first wave broke after 2 hours. The Drekari pulled back, leaving thousands of dead bodies on the ground. Taiho did not celebrate. He walked among his soldiers, checking wounds and counting ammunition. They had lost no one in the first wave, but they had used a lot of bullets. "We need to save more," he told them. "Make every shot count. No spray and pray, only aimed shots, only kills." The humans nodded. They understood. Commander Yuna approached Taiho. She had blood on her scales from the fighting. Some of it was hers, most of it was not. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Your soldiers killed more Drekari than mine did, and you lost no one," experienced Taiho said simply. "Humans have been fighting for thousands of years. They learned how to kill efficiently a long time ago. But you have no armor, no scales, no natural weapons." Taiho looked at her. "We have something better. We have patience, we have endurance, and we have each other." The second wave came 3 hours later. This time there were 20,000 Drekari. They had adapted. They moved faster now. They had grown thicker shells on their heads. The long rifle shots from the roof did not kill them as easily anymore, so the humans adapted to Sujin switched to different ammunition. Harder bullets that could punch through the new shells. When she ran out of those, she moved to explosive rounds that blew the Drekari apart from the inside. Dongwu set traps. He took broken glass and metal scraps and spread them in the paths the Drekari used. When they stepped on the sharp objects, they stumbled. When they stumbled, he shot them. A young soldier named Yunji had an idea. She noticed that the Drekari avoided light. They were creatures of darkness. So she took emergency flares and made a ring of fire around the building. The Drekari had to slow down when they crossed the light. And when they slowed down, they died. The second wave broke after 4 hours. The humans had lost 3 soldiers this time. They had killed more than 5,000 Drekari. Day came. The sun rose over a field of corpses. Taiho allowed his soldiers to rest in shifts. 4 hours of sleep, then back to the line. No one complained. No one argued. They simply followed the orders and trusted their leader. Yuna watched them sleep. She saw how they arranged themselves, always in groups, always touching someone else. A hand on a shoulder, a head on a chest. They slept like a family, not like soldiers. "Why do they do that?" she asked Taiho. "Do what?" "Sleep together like that, touching each other." Taiho looked at his soldiers with something like love in his eyes. "Because humans need connection. We are social creatures. We get strength from each other. When we are alone, we are weak. But when we are together, we can do anything." The third day brought the hardest fighting yet. The Drekari attacked in continuous waves now. They did not stop. They did not rest. They just kept coming and coming and coming. Every hour more of them appeared. Every hour the ammunition got lower. Taiho fought on the front line. He did not hide behind his soldiers. He stood where the danger was greatest and killed anything that came close. His armor was torn in 6 places. His left arm was bleeding. But he did not stop. Yuna fought beside him. She had never fought beside a human before. She had always thought they were too slow, too weak, too fragile. But Taiho moved like water. He was never where the enemy expected him to be. He was always in the right place at the right time. "How are you still standing?" she asked him during a brief pause. "You have been fighting for 3 days? You have not slept more than 4 hours?" Any Valoran would have collapsed by now. Taiho smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but real. Humans are not the fastest creatures, he said. We are not the strongest. We cannot fly or swim or see in the dark. But we can do one thing better than any other creature in the universe. What is that? We can keep going. When everything hurts, when our bodies scream at us to stop, when there is no hope left, we keep going. We put one foot in front of the other. We take one more breath, we fire one more shot, and then we do it again and again and again. Looked at the horizon where more Drakari were gathering. That is our gift. That is our curse. Humans do not know how to quit. The fourth night was the worst. 40,000 Drakari attacked at once. They broke through the walls in 3 places. The fighting moved inside the building. Tejo fought in the hallways. Space was too small for rifles. He used his pistol. When the pistol ran out of bullets, he used his knife. When his knife broke, he used his fists. When his fists were broken, he used his elbows and knees and teeth. He killed 17 Drakari with his bare hands before Sujin pulled him back to safety. By morning, only 19 humans remained alive. But the line had held. The civilians were still safe. The building still stood. Tejo sat against a wall, too tired to move. His whole body was one big wound, but his eyes were still calm, still steady, still unafraid. Yuna sat beside him. She did not speak. She just sat there, breathing the same air, sharing the same exhaustion for the first time in her life. She understood what true strength looked like. It did not look like scales or claws or muscles. It looked like a quiet man who refused to stop fighting for people who had mocked him. The 5th day began with fire in the sky. The Drakari had brought something new. Flying creatures that spat acid bombs. They flew over the building and dropped the burning liquid on the roof. 3 Valoran soldiers died before anyone could react. Sujin grabbed a weapon and ran to the roof. She stood in the open with acid falling around her and shot the flying creatures out of the sky. She killed 23 of them before the acid burned through her armor and ate into her skin. She did not scream. She just kept shooting until she could not stand anymore. Dongwu carried her inside. Her face was badly burned. One of her eyes was gone, but she was still breathing. "Did I get them all?" she whispered. Dongwu looked at the sky. It was clear now. "You got them all," he said. She smiled with her ruined face. "Good, that is good." Commander Yuna watched this happen. She felt something strange in her chest. It was not anger. It was not fear. It took her a long time to understand what it was. It was shame. She had called these creatures weak. She had laughed at them. And now a woman with half her face burned off was smiling, because she had protected people she did not even know. The fighting continued. By midday, only 15 humans were still able to fight. They had run out of rifle ammunition. They were down to pistols and knives and whatever they could pick up from the ground. But they did not stop. Tejo was everywhere. He moved from position to position, helping wherever the fighting was hardest. His body was broken in many places. He had 3 cracked ribs. His left shoulder was dislocated. He had lost so much blood that his skin was pale like paper, but he kept fighting. A young soldier named Jiwan died that afternoon. He was only 22 years old. He had been holding a hole in the wall by himself, while the others moved civilians to a safer room. The Drakari finally overwhelmed him. He disappeared under a pile of black bodies and sharp claws. When the wave passed, they found his body. He had a grenade in his hand. The pin was pulled. 15 dead Drakari lay around him. He had taken them with him. Tejo stood over Giwan's body for a long moment. His face showed no emotion, but something changed in his eyes. They became harder, colder, more determined. "We keep fighting," he said quietly. For him, for all of them. The humans nodded. They did not cry. There would be time for crying later. If there was a later that evening, Yuna found Tejo alone on the roof. He was looking at the sunset. The sky was red and orange and purple. It was beautiful, even with the dark shapes of Drakari moving below. "Why are you up here?" she asked. "Remembering," he said. "Earth has sunsets like this. I used to watch them with my family when I was young." "Do you have family?" Children? Taiho shook his head. No, I never married. This life does not allow for such things. Then why fight? Why die for strangers? Why come all this way to protect people who mocked you? Taiho turned to look at her. His eyes were tired but clear. Commander, let me tell you something about humans. We are not like other species. We do not fight because we are strong. We fight because others are weak. We do not protect because we expect reward. We protect because it is right. He looked back at the sunset. In our history, humans have done terrible things to each other. We have killed and conquered and destroyed. We have been cruel and selfish and stupid. But we have also been brave and kind and generous. We have sacrificed ourselves for strangers. We have crossed oceans to help people we never met. We have died for ideas like justice and freedom and love. He paused. That is what makes us human. Not our bodies. Not our technology. Not our numbers. It is our choice. Every day we choose who we want to be. And today, I choose to be the kind of person who stands between evil and the innocent. Yuna did not know what to say. She had lived for 200 years. She had met thousands of different creatures, but she had never met anyone like this man. I was wrong about you, she said finally. I was wrong about all of you. Taiho shrugged. You judged us by what you saw. We looked weak. We had no claws or armor. It made sense to think we were prey. He smiled slightly. But appearances lie. The most dangerous creatures are often the ones that do not look dangerous at all. The night brought more attacks. The Drekari seemed to sense that the end was near. They threw everything they had at the building. Wave after wave. Thousands and thousands of black bodies crashing against the walls like water against rock. Taiho fought at the main entrance. He stood in the doorway with nothing but a broken blade in his hand and killed everything that tried to get past him. Blood covered him from head to toe. Some of it was his. Most of it was not. A Drekari commander came for him. It was bigger than the others, with 4 arms and a mouth full of dripping fangs. It moved faster than anything Taiho had ever seen. It stabbed him through the chest with a barbed spine. Taiho looked down at the spike coming out of his body. He looked up at the Drekari commander. Then he grabbed the creature's head with both hands and snapped its neck. He fell to his knees. The spike was still in his chest. Blood poured from the wound. Sujin and Dongwu dragged him inside. They put him on a table and tried to stop the bleeding. But the wound was too deep. The spine had gone through his lung. Yuna pushed through the crowd and looked down at him. His face was pale. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes were still open, still calm, still unafraid.
Ow.
You should rest, Yuna said. Her voice was shaking. Save your strength. Taiho laughed. It was a weak sound that turned into a cough. Blood came from his mouth. Rest? He whispered. I can rest when I am dead. Which will be soon enough. No, you cannot die. You came here to save us. You cannot die now. Taiho looked at her. For the first time, she saw something soft in his eyes. Something gentle. Commander, do you remember what you asked me in that hall? You asked what humans are made of. Yuna nodded. Tears were falling from her eyes. She did not know why she was crying. I will tell you now, Taiho continued. Humans are made of stubbornness. We are made of hope. We are made of the refusal to give up, even when giving up is the smart choice. He coughed again. We are made of love. Love for our families. Love for our friends. Love for strangers we will never meet. He closed his eyes for a moment. That is what humans are made of, Commander. And that is why we will never stop fighting. Even when we are broken. Even when we are dying. Even when there is no hope left. He opened his eyes and looked at her. Now go. Hold the line. I will rest here for a moment. Just for a moment, Yuna stood up. She looked down at the human who had taught her more about courage than 200 years of war ever had. I will hold the line, she promised. I will hold it until the very end. She picked up a weapon from the floor and walked back to the battle. Behind her, Taiho smiled and closed his eyes. The Alliance reinforcements arrived on the morning of the 6th day. Admiral Ayun commanded the rescue fleet. He was an old warrior with white hair and tired eyes. He had fought in many wars and seen many terrible things, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw on KESSA-4. The battlefield around the building was covered with dead Drakari. Thousands of them. Tens of thousands. They lay in piles 3 bodies deep, stretching out in every direction as far as the eye could see. The ground was black with their blood, and in the center of this ocean of death stood one building, damaged, burning in places. But still standing, Admiral Heian landed his shuttle in the courtyard. He stepped out and looked around. The smell of blood and smoke filled his nose. The silence was heavy and strange after so much violence. Commander Yuna walked out to meet him. She was covered in wounds. One of her arms hung limp at her side. Half of her silver scales were missing, torn off in the fighting. She looked like death walking, but she was alive, and she was not alone. Behind her came the survivors. 3,000 civilians walked out of the building. Children held their mothers' hands. Old ones leaned on young ones. They were scared and hungry and exhausted, but they were alive. Admiral Heian stared at them. He could not believe it. How? He asked. How is this possible? My scouts said there were 200,000 Drakari here. Your fleet was destroyed. You had no reinforcements? How did you survive? Yuna looked back at the building. Her eyes were filled with something Admiral Heian had never seen in a Valoran before. It was respect. Deep, genuine respect. Humans, she said simply. Humans. What do you mean? 48 humans arrived on the 2nd day. They held the line for 5 days. They killed more than 30,000 Drakari. They refused to retreat. They refused to surrender. They refused to die until every civilian was safe. Admiral Heian shook his head. That is impossible. 48 soldiers against 200,000? No species could do that. These humans did. She turned and walked back to the building. Admiral Heian followed her. Inside, the medical teams were working on the wounded. There were Valorans with missing limbs and burned scales. There were civilians with broken bones and deep cuts. And there were humans. Only 11 humans had survived. Taiho was among them. He lay on a table with machines attached to his chest. The barbed spine had been removed, but the damage was severe. His lung had collapsed. His heart had stopped twice during the night. The doctors said he should be dead, but he was not dead. He was breathing, slowly, painfully, but breathing. Admiral Heian looked down at him. This was the human who had held the line. This small, soft creature with no claws and no scales and no natural armor. He had stood against an army of monsters and refused to fall. He is the bravest person I have ever met, Yuna said quietly. She stood beside the table, watching Taiho's chest rise and fall. He came here knowing he would probably die, and he did it anyway. For people who had mocked him, for people who had called him weak. Admiral Heian did not know what to say. He had been fighting wars for 50 years. He had met many brave soldiers. But this was different. This was something beyond bravery. The Drakari swarm had retreated, not destroyed, not defeated, but broken in spirit. They had never met resistance like this before. They had never faced creatures who simply refused to stop. They had pulled back into the dark spaces between stars, confused and scared for the first time in their history. The siege of HFY was over. But the story was just beginning. 1 month later, Commander Yuna stood before the Galactic Alliance Council. The Great Hall was full of representatives from 100 different species. They had all heard rumors about what happened on HFY. Now, they wanted the truth. Yuna walked to the center of the room. She moved slowly because her wounds were still healing. But her voice was strong. I came here to give my report on the siege of HFY, she began. But I find that reports cannot capture what I witnessed. Numbers cannot describe the courage I saw. Words cannot explain the sacrifice that was made. She paused and looked around the room. Many of you know that I met the human delegation a few weeks before the siege. I stood in this very hall and mocked them. I called them weak. I called them prey. I laughed at them and told them to go back to their little planet. The hall was silent. Everyone remembered that day. I was wrong, Yuna continued. I was more wrong than I have ever been in my life. And I say this not to shame myself, but to make sure none of you make the same mistake. She took a deep breath. 48 humans held against 200,000 Drekari for 5 days. They had no reinforcements. They had limited supplies. They knew they would probably all die, and they came anyway. Her voice became harder. They did not come for glory. They did not come for recognition. They did not come to prove anything to us. They came because there were people who needed help, and they could provide that help. It was that simple, that pure. She looked at the empty seat where the human representative should be sitting. Earth had not sent anyone to the council since the mockery. I have been a warrior for 200 years. I've killed thousands of enemies. I have won countless battles. I thought I knew what strength was. I thought strength was scales and claws and muscles. She shook her head. I was wrong. Strength is the decision to stand when you could run. Strength is fighting for strangers who have given you nothing. Strength is dying with a smile because you know you did the right thing. She reached to her belt and removed her ceremonial blade. It was the symbol of her rank, her honor, her entire career. She placed it on the council table. This blade has taken many lives. It has won many victories, but it is nothing compared to what I saw in HFY. The humans taught me that the greatest weapon is not made of metal, it is made of will. And human will is the strongest force in the universe. She straightened up and looked at the council. The question before us is whether humanity deserves a seat among the stars. I say yes. It's not because they are strong or fast or powerful, but because they are good, because they protect, because they sacrifice, because they love. She paused. The real question is not whether they deserve to sit with us. The real question is whether we deserve to sit with them. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, the representatives began to stand. They rose from their seats in a wave of respect and recognition. Humanity was granted full Alliance membership 3 months later. Taiho returned to Earth to recover. His wounds healed slowly, but they healed. He walked with a cane now. His lung would never be the same. But he was alive. He never spoke publicly about HFY. When reporters asked him about his heroism, he simply said, "We did what anyone would do. We saw people in danger and we helped them. That is all." But across the galaxy, the story spread. Not through official channels or news broadcasts. Spread through whispers and songs and stories told around fires. The tale of 48 humans who stood against an army. The tale of a quiet warrior who refused to fight for pride but would die for strangers. At the ceremony welcoming humanity to the Alliance, a young Valoran cadet approached Taiho. She was nervous and shy and could barely look him in the eye. "Sir," she said quietly, "is it true what Commander Yuna said? That you feel no anger toward those who mocked you?" Taiho looked at her. His eyes were kind. "Anger is heavy," he said. "Makes the journey harder. I prefer to travel light, but they were cruel to you. They laughed at you. They called you weak." Taiho smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "And then I had the chance to prove them wrong. Not with words, not with arguments, but with actions." He shrugged. "That is worth more than any revenge." The cadet bowed deeply. In her culture, it was the highest sign of respect. Taiho bowed back, and he turned and walked away, as quietly as he had come. Yuna watched him go. She stood at the edge of the crowd, her scales shining in the light of 100 alien suns. She had never felt so small. She had never felt so grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. The words were too quiet for anyone to hear, but somehow Taiho paused at the doorway. He turned and looked at her across the crowded room. He nodded once. Then he was gone. The galaxy continued to spin. Wars were fought, peace was made, empires rose and fell. But the story of HFY lived on. It became legend, it became myth, became the answer to a question that every species had asked since the beginning of time. What makes a true warrior? Not strength, not speed, not weapons or armor or scales. A true warrior is someone who fights for those who cannot fight for themselves. A true warrior is someone who stands when others run. A true warrior is someone who gives everything, expects nothing, and keeps going until the very end. A true warrior is human.